Well, hello everybody. My name is Chris Bogdan, a director with the IPA from the state of Pennsylvania, and I am here with the 2020 IPA inductee into the Hall of Fame, Mr. Dave Zychowski. Dave,
Good
how are you
afternoon.
doing?
Good afternoon. I am doing excellent. Welcome to the Pennsylvania Hills on a beautiful summer day.
It's been a nice summer all year, hasn't
Oh
it?
wow, crazy summer. Very one of the hottest on record.
There you go. So to start with, congratulations on being inducted into the Hall of Fame. I know your career, I've obviously been around you a lot of my life, and it's an awesome honor for you. So congratulations from everybody.
Thank you very much. Humbled, very humbled, and very appreciative.
Cool. So let me ask you a question, because a lot of people may not know. How did you begin playing polka music?
Oh boy, this goes back to when when my dad's, naturally my grandfather was from Poland, my grandparents were from Poland. On my father's side, my mother's side was Croatian. And as early as I can remember, probably back to 3 years old, I can still remember that, believe it or not, we would go down for the Christmas holidays. And at Christmas time, we would go down my Uncle Uncle Frank's and my Uncle Stash, and we would have all the Soikas, the Zychowskis playing, and it just, and it was just part of our life. So that intrigued us, and we were just brought into it. I think when I went to school, I didn't know there was any other kind of music, probably.
So now, did they play polkas also, or play an instrument?
No, there was no one until my brother and I came along that played an instrument in the family. They always wanted to, but they came up during the Depression and obviously never had the money and for the lessons and the instruments. But my dad, he would have died to play an instrument. But coming up in the era they did, the opportunity didn't present itself.
Got it. So you obviously play the clarinet, sax, trumpet. What was your first instrument?
My first instrument was saxophone.
Okay.
And alto sax, and I took lessons from a gentleman named Albert Chichoma. He was from Ambridge, and he was very well known throughout the whole Beaver Valley. He was a professional reed player, and I started my lessons, I think, at 6 years old. 5 and a half, 6.
And then when did you pick up the clarinet and the trumpet?
Well, we used to practice, when we were constantly in the polkas. My brother and myself, and we just picked them up, and we would play in front of the old stereo. You had your hi-fi and your stereos, and once we started going to the dances, we seen Little Wally, and back in the day, there was no tapes, and you brought home an album. You either bought a stereo or hi-fi. I remember the hi-fis were $3, the stereo were $4, and when you walked out of a dance hall, you had 3, 4, 5 albums. And we would go home and we would just upside down. We knew what song, we knew what lick, we knew everything. We would just sit in front of the stereo. We wore out 50 needles going back and forth, and also the pronunciation. In our home, we didn't speak Polish, but every time we're the grandparents and everybody spoke Polish, we would pick up a lot there. And just phonetically and everything, and as we, you're playing the alto, well, let's see, if I play a reed, I got to pick up the clarinet, listen to Little Wally, and so on and so forth. So, and then from there, later on, I picked up the trumpet, and a lot of the guys were going, way back in the day, you were either, you were the trumpet player or a reed player, and then when it started, you had the Gomolkas coming in and all that, and when you saw some of these guys and their talent, well, naturally we had to do it.
You had to do it. Okay. So what was the first band you played with?
First band, my brother and I formed, it was called Spectacular Polka Airs. That was back in, I believe, 69. And, we were looking for, it was hard back then, because every area, Newcastle area, had their, the Frankie Lichkas and all their Newcastle guys, and that was like a different era.
Yeah.
And you remember Monaca Polish Club, and we were the Beaver County guys. So my dad grew up years and years ago back in Ambridge, and he was very good friends with Richie Benkowski's father, Ted, Taju. And after war, they all got together, and they were lifelong friends since they were kids. So one night down in Monaca Polish Club, we were just forming the band. We were probably 12, 13, 14. And back then the dances were 10 to 2, and and that was a norm. So, my dad ran into, Mr. Benkowski, Ted, and down there, and he's telling us about Richie, bought him a concertina, and poor Richie's home in bed. Okay, this is 2:30 in the morning or something, and Ted insisted, we got to go down and, he goes to, meet Rich and all that stuff, and poor Richie comes out, and he was like 12 years old, I think, and he made him play concert. So 4 o'clock in the morning, we're down at Richie's parents' house. He's playing concertina, and we hit it off as friends, and I talked to him last week. We're still great friends to this day, and Richie and I grew up together as kids. From playing pinochle on the porch with his mother, with his grandmother from Poland, for football out in the street, and we grew up together. His dad built a big practice room down because he lived right in town, and we would go down and practice hours and hours on end.
Now, who else was in that first band? So was it you three?
My brother Jan, he was the leader. There was myself, Richie Zychowski, and one of the neighbors was his dad played in a polka band years and years ago, and that's Pete Zychowski. He was in the band, and then we had from Eloquipa another kind of polka guy that we ran into. My parents ran into down at a Polish club. Mr. Zymak and his boy Matt played drums and started out. So it was 5 of us starting out.
Nice. And then how many albums did you guys record?
We recorded 3 with the polka eras.
Okay. I could visualize all 3 of them, I believe.
Really?
Where'd you record them at?
We recorded those when Dale Sinchek had the label, Wham Records, and Gary was just getting into it out of the service, and they had a smaller 4-track studio. It was right up the street from where Peppermint was, if I could remember that far back. But I remember the studio very well. It was the room was very small. The control room was very compact and everything. Okay. And that's actually when we got to meet Del Sinchek, and who at that time owned Ducey Music, and that's how we met Gary Ramey. And we actually met them through Larry Walk, because Larry Walk ran obviously the world famous Door, ballroom. We all remember that. And Larry Walk, he just took to our family. They were friends from going to the dances for years and years, and he started booking the polka airs up there, and so Larry actually, kind of tied us all in together.
So that brings up, obviously not only a musician, but this leads us into Wham Records. So how did you become a producer? You're a musician, you have your own band, you played with all these other bands. How did you even wake up one day and say, I would want to be a record producer?
Well, I was just mesmerized when we went in the studio. Gary, everybody, his talents are unimaginable, and I was just memorized. And then a couple of years down the road, it wasn't long. I was maybe 20, 21, and I forget how exactly it happened. Whether Gary had brought it to my mind, and that Del was going to take different avenues, and he was selling the business. And right out of high school, I had a very, very good job. I was very fortunate, and so I had a few bucks in my pocket, and I said, "We're going to give this a try." So that's how that came about.
Wow. So then, when was that? When did you start, or when did you become a producer?
1974.
1974. Do you remember the first album you produced?
Yeah, actually, the first one I worked with was with Scrubby and Larry, the Dynatones. Buffalo's a Polka Town, but we actually didn't record that. That was already recorded. I was right in the middle of that. And the actual first one we did, I believe, was Peppermint Sticks from Western Pennsylvania.
Western Pennsylvania. White cover.
Yeah, Robert Globala,
yeah. That's a good album,
Joe Stolarz, and he's still friends with Joe to this day.
There you go. So as you go through there, you were involved in so many polka albums. Whenever you look at the list, it's just amazing how many polka albums you had your hands on. What was one thing that stuck out of all those years, of all those polka albums you did? What was one of the favorite, the most memorable polka albums that you produced?
Well, there was a lot of, obviously working in the studio with, some of the best in the industry. But the ones that really stood out, I mean, we had some absolutely hilarious times, as working, but when you get scrubby in the studio, I mean, you're working 24 hours, and everybody has a few drinky winkies, and it's absolutely, they're making fantastic music, but it's absolutely hilarious. And probably the best ones though were the live ones we did. Lenny Live up at Mark Jansen's Frankenmuth Summerfest. Jimmy Weber up Fedora's Grove, and the one that has to stand out the most, hoping not to slide anybody, was the Live Wire.
So tell me how that happened. Livewire is obviously one of the first live recordings I've ever heard, and I remember buying the cassette at National Record Mart, and I put it in, and we were at a restaurant in the South Hills, and my mother wanted me to take my headphones off, and I couldn't take them off because it was so damn good.
Yeah.
So how did that whole project come up, and how, like, what was the thinking behind it? Was that you? Was that the
Combined effort. Larry Trojak, naturally. Larry had always a lot of input in us. You know, he would be like the push, maybe, if you would, a little bit. You know, he would come up with these ideas, just like the religious health in Chapter 7 and all that. And naturally, Scrubby just jumped into it, and you know, the personality he had, on top of all the talent and the musicians, and you know, we put all our heads together, and we said we're gonna give this a whirl, make this happen. And I'll never forget, it was a cold, cold night.
So that was your first live album you ever did. Like,
yes.
Were you nervous going into that project? Like, this is the first one ever in polkas, basically, when you think about it. Like, what was going through your mind as you were doing that?
A lot of thinking went into it. And, you know, we always did our homework. I would never want to be, you know, you always have the, you know, your little butterflies, just like a football player jumping on a field for his first game. But I was never a shy character. So, you know, plus, you know, we had already, you know, I was already acclimated into the recording a little bit. And, and I had already worked enough with Gary Ramey. And we were like, you know, two good linemen on a football team. Yeah. He was going left, I knew he was going left. I was going right, he was going right. And, we worked down through the years, always just very, very well together.
So another album that you produced was Roll Out the Barrel by the New Brass. And the reason why I bring this up is every time I ever went to a wedding or a Christmas party, they would always play that song because that was like the only good version of the Roll Out the Barrel. Tell me about that. How did that one, like, who came up with the idea to record Roll Out the Barrel and all that?
Okay, just like you say, we played a few jobs just recently, a few private jobs with Ray J, and it was a mostly American crowd. It was for a company, and that's the type of thing you did, you know. Well, you go there, and naturally you want to relate to all the people. So, what's one of the first songs? Roll Out the Barrel. Let's do Roll Out the Barrel. And and you see everybody in the crowd singing along, whether they're, you know, you don't have to be Polish or Italian or whatever, but everybody's singing along. So when they said Roll Out the Barrel, my first impression was like, oh my, you know, come on, guys. And but the version, naturally, Mitch and Roger back then, and you know, the musicians they brought in, you know, all top notch, and we started listening to it, and then, you know, Ramey and I are sitting in the control room and say, you know, we're talking about, you know, what can we just add to make something, you know, make it characterize it in a different way, and that's how, you know, Gary come up with the phase shifter and all that, and and it turned out to be like, wow, you know, so.
It's definitely a classic album. It's probably one of the most popular ones because it was transcends polkas. It was everybody wanted to hear that song.
Oh yeah, we did that when they rolled in. We would generally roll in out of town bands, set up Friday. They would get in, you know, Friday early evening. We would set up, and so it was just one of those nights. Everybody was on. So we said, well, you know, let's start recording. See how far we get till we went 36 straight hours.
Wow. Amazing.
36 straight hours, and you're up. You know, you're pumped, you're up.
Yeah.
You know, there's no, and the coffee, you know, now the coffee's going. And, you know, back in the day when everybody smoked, you'd crack the door in the middle of the night, looked like the place was on fire. A lot of memories.